Hey folks, everything due under the sun. Getting caught up on some of the news that has been going on, eclipsed by the biggest civilian protest, as one Israeli reporter put it, ever in the world, pretty much. And that is the trucker convoy protest, and which is happening all around the world now. So it very likely is the largest ever, pretty much worldwide protest against vaccine mandates. A lot of people who see something different about it and want to get rid of it. But Israel, what's happening in Israel? What's happening with Iran? Well, the U.S. is trying to get the nuclear deal going again. This is from MSN.com. Biden administration believes it has until end of month to salvage Iran nuclear deal. So Biden believes he has until end of February to salvage the Iranian nuclear agreement. Otherwise, the U.S. will have to change tack and launch aggressive efforts to prevent Tehran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. So they find basically that it's easier to go along with a nuclear deal. And I guess they would hope and dream and close their eyes and cross their fingers that Tehran wouldn't continue to work towards something. At least they can say they didn't know Tehran Iran was working towards something. They can just say, well, the nuclear deal was there, so it should have been working. Right? So I think it's just a way politically to get past actually doing something physically on the ground. The session is a critical one, a Syrian administration official said, referring to a high-level talks that resumed in Vienna. Nothing with Iran is ever a straight line, but we are getting to a decisive moment. The agreement, which was abandoned by Trump in 2018, puts verifiable limits on Iran's nuclear program, which were designed to prevent the country from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Of course, throughout that time, Israel found various secret bunkers and such, and did cyber attacks on them. They were still moving towards a deliverable nuclear weapon in Iran, for sure. Iran has increasingly broken away from its commitments under the agreement, and many believe it would be able to quickly develop nuclear weapons and pose a serious threat to security and stability in the Middle East if there isn't a breakthrough in Vienna. So they're putting their hopes in the nuclear deal. Well, here's Senator Cruz. Senate Republicans threaten to block any Iran nuclear agreement submitted to Congress. This is the other day. A group of 33 Republicans, led by Senator Ted Cruz, are arguing that any nuclear deal with Iran requires Senate approval, warning President Biden that they will do everything in their power to block one if he moves forward with it. We write to call attention to a range of obligations that your administration is statutorily mandated to fulfill in relation to congressional oversight of any such agreement. We are committed to using a full range of options and leverage available to United States senators to ensure that you meet those obligations and that the implementation of any agreement will be severely, if not terminally, hampered if you do not. So they want a part of it. They want to have it go to a vote, basically. What is Israel doing about this? Well, this is interesting. This is from jpost.com. And it says Israel's notable silence on impending Iran deals. Even if Bennett wanted to speak up on the Iran deal, and apparently he does not, would it even matter? So does Bennett have any pull, any sway before? The last time the world powers and Iran were on the verge of signing a nuclear deal was in spring 2015. Then Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did the unthinkable. He walked into the U.S. Congress and, against then President Barack Obama's express wishes, delivered a speech against the deal to the U.S. Congress himself, which was kind of a slap in the face to Obama. This was the culmination of a years-long Netanyahu campaign to shout from every microphone and television studio available, warning that the impending accord was an unmitigated disaster for Israel and the region and the world. It says, but fast forward 7 years, that's an interesting number, isn't it? 7 years, and the world powers and Iran are again on the verge of entering a nuclear agreement. This time, however, Israel's reaction is barely registered muted opposition. Yes, Bennett said before Sunday's cabinet meeting that the agreement will make it more difficult to tackle Iran's nuclear problem. It will kind of lock Israel in and lock the U.S. out from taking action during this, because, part of the agreement is, if we're part of the agreement, then you can't do anything against us, because we've all agreed to do the right thing and stop the run to having nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, Iran can do so covertly and still work on the delivery method of nuclear weapon, etc. So if Israel opposed it, which it is opposed rather, which it is, nobody is hearing about it, because Bennett isn't really doing anything about it. So it looks like this nuclear deal is going to go ahead. It's not going to be good for Israel. Israel's military will again have to do something on their own. And Bennett, interestingly, again, he isn't doing much. He isn't saying much about it. He's not putting up much of a fuss one way or another. And it's interesting why or why not, I guess. But in other news, if you look at Russia and we start talking about the war of Gog-Magog again, you see that there are forces gathering. So the war of Gog-Magog is, I believe, Russia, Turkey, and Iran, an alliance there of those groups and other groups. I believe there's a dual fulfillment of Gog-Magog, but it says these nations come against Israel in the last days. Now, is there any example of this? Well, this is Debka.com. There is now an armada of Russian warships, masses for drills at Tartus in Syria. So Tartus is, I believe it's a Russian-owned port or base that they can refuel at, resupply in the Mediterranean. And they're amassing for drills. Alongside its troop buildup around Ukraine, Russia has signed a large naval force, a force on the northern and Baltic fleets to the Syrian port of Tartus. They are to drill landing and amphibious assault force on a shore and sea lift troops and cargo, including armored vehicles, under the direction of the Russian Navy. Does that sound like the War of Gog-Magog, where they rush in and together with other countries against Israel? Is that what they're practicing for, with amphibious assault vehicles coming from the sea, which is really an unprotected border for Israel? And it is a side they would want to attack. They would want to attack all sides, and in fact, the Bible does speak about the outer ring, Psalm 83, I believe it is, and nations all around attacking Israel. So again, convenient, interesting that they're amassing ships, they're practicing amphibious assaults, they're sea lifting troops and cargo, armored vehicles, all in this drill. It says Admiral Nikolai Yevmenov, the Defense Ministry, announced on Friday, February 4th, that they were taking part in this, this practice training run, but they're taking part are for 140 warships and support vessels, 60 aircraft, 1,000 items of military hardware, and about 10,000 troops. So no small amount of aircraft and troops, 10,000 troops, certainly. That's a good training exercise. And again, when you look at the Battle of Gog-Magog, how does Russia move troops down there quickly? Well, now they've got a pile of them sitting there ready to go, and they could airlift a whole lot more troops in very quickly. And they've got a lineup against Ukraine as well. Debka File describes the operation as bringing together the largest concentration of Russian warships and warplanes Russia has ever deployed in Syria. Interesting, right? Because the battle basically happens in around overtop Syria. Remember in Isaiah, it speaks about the destruction of Damascus, Isaiah 17. And so the battle really is going to kind of be staged there, or at least the troops, the mechanisms of war, the planes, etc. They're going to be staged in Syria for battle against Israel. So again, convenient. The Naval Task Force is made up of large amphibious assault ships. It goes in names, which completed its transit around Europe to arrive in the Eastern Mediterranean. Moscow terms Moscow terms the naval drill aimed at protecting Russia's national interests, which is likely the oil fields in the world ocean and countering military threats from the sea. Separate drills will run in the Mediterranean, North and Okhotsk seas in the northeastern Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. So they're doing drills, I guess, all over, for the protecting what they feel are their national interests. So they got troops all over. Their military is expanding, and it looks like they're getting troops ready for what could potentially be the war of Gog Magog. If some peace deal is presented between Israel, the Palestinians, and Iran for a 7-year period, and maybe they would use that as cover and go to battle against Israel. So we'll see how this turns out. Currently, the ships are busy at the Russian logistics support facility in Tartus, replenishing their fuel and lubricants, fresh water, and food supplies to the required level. This is the first time that the Russian military has fully activated its primary logistic facility on the Mediterranean. So they made an agreement with Syria basically to use Tartus as their base. Don't let it go over your head that this is one of the largest gatherings of military ships, or if not the largest in the Mediterranean of these Russian ships. Massive deployment of troops, and they've got troops everywhere. So interesting when you look at it from the standpoint of Bible prophecy, what the Bible says about Gog Magog, and how this Iran deal is going, this agreement to not create nuclear weapons, and really cuffing Israel to the point where they can't do what they need to do to continue to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. So like I said, this really does tie the hands of Israel, and it does set up and weaken Israel, and it does set up a time when there will be a larger battle there. And so Isaiah 17 and Ezekiel 38 and 39, speaking of the war of Gog Magog. So these are the things coming down the pipe, a little bit of an update on Israel. Always lots of interesting things going on. And this simmers, and it's been simmering for years. So when does it take off? I don't know. But this agreement, this nuclear agreement, is now on the table, and they're trying to get it done before the end of the month, I guess is what it said. End of February, yep. They're looking to get it done, and we'll see in the next couple of weeks if they do, and what that ultimately means for Israel's security. Thanks for watching, guys. A little bit of an update on the Middle East and Israel, and we'll see you guys in the next video.